we will be presenting on addiction and mental health this evening, and just a little bit as some background around the Breakthrough program. It began back in 2015 as part of the ICE action plan that was around at the time. However, over the years, it has now become this kind of 6-part series that we have provided to people several times throughout a year online, and that allows, we kind of cover a lot of pretty common topics that come up in relation to substance use or addictive type of behaviours. We do tend to probably cover a little bit more around drugs and alcohol as opposed to other addictions. We do touch on gambling in some sessions as well, and we're always looking to increase and grow what it is that we deliver. We generally receive feedback and as well, which we take into account when kind of planning for, the next year as well, to see what is going to be most helpful for those people in the community. Generally, these sessions are an education-based session. However, we do like to try and be really interactive, or as much as we can be in the time that we're kind of allotted. And so there'll be a number of activities along the way that would love to have your participation in. As per the comment provided in the chat from NAS Recovery, definitely welcome, questions or comments along the way. If there's anything that you would like to share or are unsure about, we definitely want to provide as much information as possible that's going to be helpful. And generally, these breakthrough sessions are directed towards people who might have loved ones, whether that's family members, partners, friends, extended family, someone in their life that might be struggling with some kind of addiction, and just providing some information, maybe some strategies on how to perhaps engage in conversations, or just understand a little bit more around maybe why their loved one might be using substances, gambling, whatever it might be, as a tool to be able to cope. So without further ado, I will get started on the PowerPoint, and we're going to jump straight in to an activity straight away. So hopefully we can get a number of you to either open up another browser if you're on a portable device, or if you're on a computer, open up another tab where you can go to menti.com and then type in the code 33456109, and I will just change the screen share so we can have a look. Now I just need to share the screen. So if you just want to pop in any words, sentences, comments around what would you describe mental health to be? What's your understanding of it? What do you know mental health to be?
Hả? Nghe trả lời. Ya caché, ya ahorita lo hago.
Nagwa, hi. Might want to mute yourself.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Lauren, if people don't know how to use Menti, can they put their answers in the chat box anyway? Because some people may be dialing on their phone from work and may not have a second device.
Absolutely. Yeah, please feel free to pop your response into the chat if you're not able to kind of use a second device, or jump into menti.com and pop your responses in there, or take yourself off mute and shout out what's your understanding, or how would you describe mental health. State of mind. Yep, absolutely. Mental is a state of mind. Yeah, so similar thinking. Absolutely. Any other thoughts about how you might describe ability to cope with daily life? Great. Cool. So feel free as thoughts come to you, you're welcome to continue to add responses into the chat, or if you have happened to hop onto Menti, feel free to kind of add things as we go. A couple of kind of, I guess, more structured responses, because there's slightly different language that we can use when we talk about mental health. It is really a state of well-being and the ability to be able to form positive relationships and reach our potential and be able to deal with life's stresses. So when we hear the terminology mental disorder or mental illness, that's generally when someone has received a formal diagnosis from, whether it be a GP, psychiatrist, or someone in the health profession. Whereas a mental health problem is probably more of a broader term, where it could include disorders or symptoms, but they may not meet what is considered the criteria to actually receive a formal diagnosis from a health professional. And often occurs, we might have some mental health problems when we've got lots of stresses going on in our life. It can impact on our thinking or our emotions, behaviors, and relationships. Pretty commonly, there's the whole chicken and the egg. Which one came first? And this goes hand in hand with alcohol and other drug, or AOD, and mental health, or MH or MHI. You might see it as in some of the slides. I guess what we tend to concentrate on is that, particularly for those of us who might work in the industry and are working with service users who are presenting with either AOD or mental health complexities, it doesn't really matter to us which came first. It's definitely One could have caused the other. There could have been underlying issues that then, for instance, there could have been an underlying mental health issue potentially that only came to the surface once someone had used a substance, and they can feed into each other and exacerbate each other as well. So one of the common things that we are aware of is that quite often people who have mental health issues can be using substances or AOD to self-medicate, whether it's for physical pain, emotional pain, trauma, grief, depression, anxiety are some pretty common ones. It may not have started out like that. It might have started out that someone used substances in an experimental way or more of a social kind of setting. And over time, it has continued to progress in terms of how much and how often. And that could be as a result that maybe there was some kind of underlying mental health issue, and the use of the substance in the first place kind of set that off. We decided that we liked the feeling of, that escape or relaxation or freedom, euphoria that we felt as an effect of using the substance. One thing that we need to, or that can be helpful to identify, is that sometimes people's behaviour might reflect as though it could potentially be mental illness, but there's also other, I guess, contributors or factors that could come into play, where someone might be presenting with a certain amount of, or with, some symptoms such as hunger, fatigue, dehydration, that could be as a result of the substance or substances that they've taken. Or it could just be the type of, perhaps where they're at in their life and their developmental stage. Quite often, a lot of mental health issues or illnesses can start to present when we're in our teen or later teen years. However, the difficulty in being able to diagnose that can be quite often, we've all probably been a teenager ourselves, at least, even if we don't have teenagers of our own or don't engage with teenagers or haven't for a while. They can be moody, hungry, tired, maybe, not having enough sleep, particularly in this day and age where we've got technology and, there's lots of screen time and that kind of thing going on. So even though they might be presenting with some symptoms that could potentially be linked to a mental health illness, it could also just be because they are a teenager and that's the developmental stage that they're going through. They're figuring out their place in life and how that, how they kind of fit in. So I've got a short video that, oh, hang on, I don't want to play it yet, that touches on mental health and AOD use. In some spaces, the video does use the terminology comorbidity. I think it comes up in the first couple of seconds. We tend to now use the terminology co-occurring whenever we're talking about mental health and AOD issues that, a person might be experiencing both. And this is the language that has come out of the Royal Commission into Mental Health that's happened here in Victoria. The Matilda Centre is based in New South Wales, and previously they have used comorbidity as the term, and it certainly has been used here, but they do use co-occurring in the video as well. But I just wanted to raise that we have tended to move away from the terminology comorbidity, and we are trying to utilise co-occurring as to minimise any stigma around the language or what might be going on for a person. So we'll have a watch of the video.
Mental health and substance use disorders are common, and they often co-occur. The co-occurrence of these conditions is often referred to as comorbidity. More than 1 in 3 Australians with a substance use disorder have at least one co-occurring mental health disorder. These include disorders like depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress. The relationship between mental and substance use disorders is complex. Some people develop problems with alcohol or other drugs as a result of using repeatedly to try and manage or self-medicate their mental health symptoms. Although this may make the person feel better in the short term, substance use can disguise a person's symptoms and in the long term make some symptoms worse. Some mental health problems, like depression, anxiety, and psychosis, may also develop as a result of substance use. Once a person has both a mental and substance use disorder, the relationship between them becomes cyclical, with each disorder maintaining the other, or making each other worse. People with co-occurring mental and substance use disorders often have difficulties in other areas of their lives, such as medical, family, or social problems. These, combined with the cyclical relationship, can complicate a person's treatment and recovery. There are effective treatments available, and people can and do get better. If you experience these symptoms, see your doctor to find out more about the types of treatments available.
So like I said, that just goes a little bit into what we do see and what we do know, and that there is support available. The numbers that we have for the co-occurring conditions of substance use disorder, which is what SUD stands for, and any kind of mental health kind of diagnosis, is listed to be somewhere between 50 to 76% based on research that into this area. However, what this doesn't capture is that we don't have the numbers of those people who may not be seeking treatment. And there's also an element that, particularly around mental, those service users who might be presenting for mental health issues, they may not disclose any alcohol or drug use. In my practical, in my work experience, I think I have certainly found that I would say close to between 90 and 95% of service users that I have ever worked with have had some kind of co-occurring condition. It may not have been a diagnosed mental health illness, but certainly that mental health problem or issue that we kind of distinguish between at the beginning of the slides this evening. So that's kind of been my experience, that majority of people who engage in alcohol and drug treatment, actually it's higher and around that 90 to 95%. And of course, there is still a gap where there's those people who aren't actually seeking any treatment that might increase some of those numbers. So what we see in terms of commonality across these areas are anxiety disorders, depression, bipolar, see a lot of trauma-related disorders. It starts to, as much as it is prevalent, the percentage starts to go down when it comes to some of the personality or psychotic disorders, ADHD, things like that. So the prevalence in terms of percentages, again, this, is based on the research that is available. However, we need to keep in mind that this may not cover all people, because there are certainly people that are not seeking treatment or engaged in any kind of support services in any way. I won't run through them all and bore you. You can kind of see what's on the slide. But again, the most common is around that generalized anxiety disorder, where it can be anywhere from 45 to 70% overall, and the trauma-related disorders is, can be up to 50% as well. What we do know is that treatment can be effective, and the best practice is evidence-based treatment, which includes things like, you might have heard of CBT or cognitive behaviour therapy, motivational interviewing. These are some frameworks that are used within the sector to work with service users and help them be able to perhaps identify patterns of behaviour, deal with underlying grief, trauma, build up social skills, coping mechanisms and strategies. And so we have the biopsychosocial approach, and that looks at a person holistically, not just identifying that. So a medical model looks at someone experiencing an illness, and that it's kind of a deficit model where you're sick, and if you do X, you will get well, or if you take X medication, you will get well. It tries to look at a person as the whole. What's their environment like? Do they have a purpose? Do they have supports in place? Do they have access to healthcare if they need it? Do they have financial means that allows them to meet their basic needs in terms of a roof over their head, food in their stomach, clothes on their back? And these, identifying and working in a holistic way can give a service user the best chance. It's also around the person who is involved, or the service user, to be involved in their treatment and making decisions about what they feel is going to be most helpful for them. And looking at not just the substance use, but also the mental health problem, and actually trying to, treat them both at the same time. So we're still in a space where that's a work in progress in the industry. Prior to the Royal Commission into mental health, there was a lot of silos happening. Someone might present to an AOD service, and it was identified that the service user might have been experiencing some mental health issues, And so the AOD service would have turned them away saying, no, you need to go and get your mental health sorted before you can engage with us. And vice versa. Someone might have presented to a mental health service for some treatment, and the service turns them away saying, well, you're too drug affected or substance affected to be engaging in treatment with us. You need to stop your substance use before we will assist you with your mental health treatment. This is an area that we are abolishing and making sure that staff across both sectors have the ability and the capacity to be able to work with someone and everything that's going on for them. It may not be that a professional is an expert in both areas, but there is some basic knowledge, at least in one, if an expert in the other area, so that there can be that support and people aren't turned away or fall through the gaps. And it might be that then another service gets brought in to assist, and there's a bit of a care team around the service user to allow for them to have their best opportunity to make changes to their life for what they want to do. Some of the barriers that we know people face when it comes to accessing treatment is that diagnosis can be difficult. I've already touched on that potentially some professionals or clinicians don't have the knowledge to treat areas, and sometimes, particularly if there are co-occurring AOD and mental health kind of symptoms or issues presenting, that they could be dismissed as a minor side effect of each other rather than it being addressed in a way that means a person is able to get access to the treatment they need. And so we really need to focus on being kind of person-centered and looking at each individual's needs across all aspects of their life. And that's where the biopsychosocial model comes in and can be really helpful so that we can really get a full picture of what's going on for a person. So we'll jump back into Menti if you've been able to get onto it. And if you can, otherwise, absolutely, you can pop your answer in the chat box. But what, if you can recall from some of the stats and things I just showed you, what are the two most common mental health conditions seen in AOD treatment? Or even from your own experience, what have you perhaps seen or heard? Depression, anxiety, BPD, yep. Schizophrenia, absolutely, that's probably the top 4. And on the screen, depression and anxiety, they are the two most common that we do tend to see. So great work there. Get back to the slides. Sorry, excuse me, going from one to the other. Got 2 screens. Sometimes I feel like I need 3, but that would just make things way more confusing, I think. So we're going to touch a little bit on some paranoia and psychosis, because these are some common things that I guess we can see particularly when someone might be using drugs often. These can be some symptoms or some effects, negative effects that can occur depending on the type of substance or substances that someone we know might be using. Better Health, Vic, provide that paranoia is the irrational and persistent feeling that people are out to get you, and that it's persistent, intrusive attention by others. And even though paranoia can also be a symptom of some particular mental health illnesses, it can also occur without the mental health illness, and when someone is using substances, commonly methamphetamine or ice, it can happen with, and it tends to be linked with someone being up for days at a time and not having that sleep, that then the paranoia can set in. Also seen it can be linked with cannabis use as well. That paranoia can certainly come into play, or people can experience it from either, you know, smoking or eating pot. Some of the things that can be helpful when we might be around someone who is experiencing some paranoia is we can explore around, is there a basis for their belief? So are they just pulling something kind of out of nowhere? Or could it be possible, and I've got a case study on the next slide that will give us an opportunity to have a bit of a discussion about it based on some of this information or things that we already know. But quite often, particularly if someone's experiencing drug-induced paranoia, for most people in most cases, once the level of intoxication or withdrawal has subsided for that person, the paranoia will disappear. Sometimes it may stay on for a few days. However, generally speaking, once that kind of impairment or the coming down and the withdrawal has occurred, the paranoia will disappear if it was strictly paranoia that was induced by the drug use. So if we think about when someone's paranoid, we don't want to dismiss their thoughts. We certainly don't necessarily want to agree with them if it's not what we're experiencing or not kind of what reality is. But we do need to try and explore and think about whether there is a basis for their fears, and perhaps talk to them or provide information so that they can understand that it is paranoia that they're experiencing. And we've got a quote here where the person didn't want to be named, but that they know that their beliefs aren't real, but in the moment it is really terrifying for them and it can feel really real for them. So we certainly don't want to dismiss that for them. We want to make sure we can try and support them to seek help. We don't have to be the knight in shining armor. We don't have to have all the answers, but we can probably offer them some comfort and, you know, perhaps make a phone call or suggest that we get some help, or see if there's someone else that they can talk to. Of course, if they say they don't want to talk to anyone, it is always good for us to respect their wishes, unless we are really concerned for their safety, in which case we might need to call a crisis team or emergency services. And these days, I guess, again, on the back of the Royal Commission, and I'm not 100% across all the changes, but and I know the centres aren't crisis centres, but there are mental health centres now that we could potentially contact if it's during business hours. And even if it's just that we're talking to a professional and saying, this is the scenario, can you perhaps please advise what we might be able to do? So let's see if we can put some of this into action. Maybe we've had experience before, or maybe we can have a think about how we might be able to support this person. So Ellen is a 21-year-old uni student and lives at home with her brother. She's just reconnected with a drug-using peer group and gone back to using both ice and cannabis. She's started missing classes and has fallen behind on her study. Ellen's brother notices that she often seems anxious and avoids going out anywhere on her own, tells her brother that she thinks she's being watched. She's seen the same car outside their house and regularly go up and down the street, and that it appears to be following her. She also frequently sees people up the street with like earpieces. What we know is that the car belongs to a neighbour and the people with the earpieces are locals using their phones. So how might her brother be able to respond to Ellen when she's sharing that she's feeling like she's been followed, unsafe? Again, feel free to take your microphone off mute or pop your response into the chat box.
Lauren, I was just going to check to see if everyone is across paranoia, because just in case people have any questions, if everyone understood what a paranoia is. Does anyone have a question or wanted to be explained a little bit more in terms of, or if not, that we can just answer the case study together. But please do ask questions. We're here to learn from each other, so do give some input. I'll put someone on the spot. Josephine, do you have any question on paranoia? And or input?
That's okay. I can share some information around maybe what her brother can respond with in terms of the case study. So when Ellen's feeling unsafe or that she's being followed, so these are things that we might experience if we are experiencing paranoia. And again, when we think everyone is watching what we're doing, we can feel uneasy. Why? Did you want to
Yeah, I just want to contribute a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I think in case of Ellen, who is 21 years old and affected with AOD, his brother should, because she's developing the fear after that, because she
Yes.
found herself somewhere that she's thinking she's very anxious from other people that she been watched, she been seeing that she's doing something paranoid or something that is not good for her.
Yes.
So she developed some fear, some sort of fear in her. So what his brother should do is his brother should be getting close to him, to her, I mean.
Yes.
And if there is any issue that need pay attention, his brother can even connecting himself with human services to
Yes.
support her with advice, seeing psychology somewhere,
Yes.
and seeing some seeking for some advice how she can be recover from the anxious and the fear that she's developing in her heart, you know.
Yes.
So counseling would help her,
Yes.
and her brother is doing good because he's there.
Yep.
But she's thinking that something affected her, but she doesn't know how to get out from there.
For
That's
sure.
how a brother can do help
Absolutely.
her.
Absolutely. Great suggestions there in, supporting Ellen, encouraging her to see a counsellor to talk about these things, maybe suggesting that she reduce or stop some of her drug taking could be beneficial for her. And these are all things that absolutely we could do and suggest. We need to remember, though, that there might be times where a person doesn't want to or doesn't believe that it is causing them any issues, even though we can see and hear, particularly based on this case study, that they are experiencing negative impacts. We need to make sure that, one, we don't feed into the fear, but two, that we certainly acknowledge it, that we know that Ellen is experiencing that. We could ask also things around, when's the last time Ellen had a proper night's sleep? When's the last time Ellen had a proper meal? And sometimes going back to those basics can be helpful as well, particularly if there's the paranoia that has come on because of the drug taking. And we're not doctors or health professionals where we need to be able to diagnose this. But generally speaking, we probably know what our siblings and how they act often when they're not substance affected or when they haven't been using substances. So we can probably make a pretty good educated guess that there's something going on for them that is not normal for them and their behaviour. We can share with them that, say the neighbour's name's Bob, I don't know. We could say, we know, yes, I understand that you're seeing that car, but we know that's Bob's car who lives 2 doors down from us. So you will see it often because Bob lives here. So he will be going to work and coming home. And it might just happen to be at the same time when you're leaving the house and coming home, because you're going off to work or you're going out during those business type of hours. Again, these are all just suggestions. It will always depend on the individual situation. But we can share some of that information to say, I acknowledge that this is what you're experiencing. But if we know it's Bob's car and Bob works, and we know that they're the times that Ellen's been going out, well, then it makes sense that she would see the car, and it might feel like he's following her because she might take off at 8 o'clock every morning and he's driving past at 8:05. And if she's walking, you know, he's going to go past her. So we can certainly kind of share some of that information. Again, it may not be helpful, or Alan may not take it on board if she's in a state of impairment or intoxication, even though she might be experiencing that paranoia. And that might be when we go, I've got you, you're safe, why don't you have something to eat, go to, you know, have a sleep, I'll stay here, or we've locked the doors. Again, whatever it kind of is to make that person feel safe, if we can, and let's have a chat about it once you've had something to eat and a rest. Because potentially then they'll be able to take it on board. If someone's really heightened because they are really fearful or anxious, no matter what we say, they may not take it on board in that moment. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Psychosis, which...
Lauren?
Sorry, Lauren.
I wanted to add into the management of the paranoia behavior from a cultural perspective as well, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Yeah. So as we know, obviously the symptoms of paranoia is like immense distrust, and it can come with hearing sounds, similar to having delusions. Sometimes what I find in African community, we're very collective. So when one person's going through something, we tend to kind of hover. And with someone going through paranoid behavior where there's distrust and hearing sounds, that may not be very helpful. So I guess I wanted to bring it up to this group to also just, the input in that. Because, for example, if someone was going through psychosis, usually the community will hear it straight away. And then everybody will go visit that person. Like it's like everybody will come. Like I'm talking 20 people, 30 people within just a matter of days. So many people visiting, sitting for long hours, praying over them, talking, asking a lot of questions, which could, for the person that's hearing sounds, that it can be a very scary place to be, because it's like, what's happening? Like all of a sudden everything is out of control. And this is because of lack of awareness that psychosis can come, or paranoid behavior can come, and especially with substance induced, and it can go away, so it's not something that has, so like I just, I guess I just wanted to bring that up. So in managing that, we would need, if you're saying someone need to have rest and being in their room and just having some time to kind of declutter all those things, the last thing they need is a bunch of people visiting and being in their ears and asking a lot of questions like, what happened, what's happening, like you're possessed or something. And that's why I said this topic is really important, because it's the most misunderstood, because sometimes it's burdened by some sort of illness and sometimes it's burdened by substances. But because of the stigma in the community and shame, a young person often doesn't disclose what they've taken, or they would just act like it came out of nowhere. So then the family then would act like some sort of illness has taken over that person, because they actually don't know that it could be a substance, and that after 5 or 4 days it could, and I have those experiences where it's just like, calm down, he's going to be okay, or she's going to be okay, because it's a matter of they have taken ice or they've taken cannabis. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's certainly helpful for me as someone who, hasn't had a lot to do with African communities. So that certainly increased my awareness now, that it is around maybe trying to get this information up to people so that there can be that understanding that as much as it is community minded, it might be that, if we don't have all the facts, it can make it really difficult to be able to manage.
Can I?
Go for it.
Thank you, Lawrence. what Nichan said is something that we are experiencing in our community, such as South Sudanese in general, because we have a lack of education, most of us, and the kids are very fast than us as adults, and we don't know those words, how they work, where we come from.
Yes,
We don't know canvas. We don't know canvas. We don't know what us is doing. It's only young generation who are coming here, involved into the community. They knows what it is. When they come, they just come and keep quiet. Mom, you can get one family home, maybe a lady who is just limited of language, living with kids. And when they come, they will not even identify, is it this one is drug or this one is alcohol? Of course, alcohol is a drug, but they have different effect on the body. So this is the problem we're facing now. And then you will be thinking that, oh, something wrong with my son or my daughter. But simply, if you know that there are something that young people use, such as cannabis and ice and other things, A or D, so it would be easy for us. So I would like to say thank you to Lichan for inviting people here and hearing all this terminology that we do not know. So I really appreciate this program, and of course, not because parents knows a lot of things about this. No, they don't know. That's why they come and calling some of the elders or relatives. Something happened to my child. Simply, if you know, you will not be calling all those people. So thank you. I just put my input that it is lack of experience from the perspective of education from us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why we're here to try and provide some of this education. And please, if I am saying anything using words, sure, of anyone jump in and ask questions, because I don't know what you don't know either. So certainly want to provide information that is going to be helpful to you all to take away from this session. So I'll jump back into psychosis. So similar but different to paranoia, can also be experienced from people when or because of the drug that they have taken. And most often, if someone is experienced drug-induced psychosis, it is because they are extremely intoxicated or sleep deprived. It can be associated with withdrawal as well. And similar to paranoia, it generally, or the symptoms, the psychotic type of symptoms tend to wear off once the drug has stopped being used, and perhaps they've, again, eaten, slept, withdrawn from the drug. We often see it most often with ice or that methamphetamine. However, similar to paranoia as well, it can occur if someone has used cannabis. It can also occur if someone has used hallucinogens or synthetic drugs. So the synthetic drugs there's a lot of them out there these days, and they are, I guess, drugs that are made up purely of chemicals to mimic other, perhaps more natural. So there's something called synthetic cannabis, and that, so where cannabis is a plant, therefore it, if it's not sprayed with anything, and it can be, the plant that grows in the ground, and can be pretty natural. There's a type of synthetic cannabis that is purely made up of chemicals, and we can find that people do experience psychosis with someone who might be using this type of drug. Hallucinogens are things like magic mushrooms or LSD, or also known as acid. We also know that, again, psychosis can be a symptom of some mental health illnesses as well. What else? Common things if someone is experiencing psychosis, and I think this slide is helpful because it gives some just pretty basic pictures around what it looks like. So some symptoms could include if someone is maybe, you know, on their way to having a psychotic episode, that their performance in school or work might drop. They might start withdrawing. So if someone has been a really social person, excuse me, and you've noticed that they've started withdrawing and spending, you know, time in their room or by themselves, that might be an indication that it's possible that they might start to experience psychosis in the future. They might have difficulties speaking. They might have had, you know, a drop in their hygiene where they're not washing or taking care of their appearance. When someone can be experiencing psychosis, they might be experiencing depressed mood, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, or hallucinations. Sorry, I've obviously been talking too much. But again, this can be really difficult where it's really hard for us to be able to diagnose or necessarily have an idea, because someone might be experiencing their mental health issue of depression or anxiety that's not actually linked with drug use as well. So it can, you know, again, it's not about us needing to make a diagnosis, but it can be helpful, I guess, to be aware that if someone is acting really out of character, then it could be that they might be experiencing some psychosis. The hallucinations and delusions are probably some big giveaways when it comes to psychosis. So they're hearing things, seeing things, even tasting things or smelling things that aren't there. And those kind of delusions around, or having those beliefs around things that aren't real or true. So if I'm, you know, telling you all that the sky is purple, you know, and I'm absolutely adamant that the sky is purple, it's possible that I'm experiencing some kind of hallucination, and that means that I am, you know, no matter what you say, I'm telling you that the sky is purple as far as I'm concerned, even though we all know that the sky is blue. Although sometimes it's grey, particularly in Melbourne, because we love having rainy weather here. Similar to paranoia on how we can try and manage someone who might be experiencing psychosis, we can do our best to make the person feel safe. With psychosis, if someone's in a loud space where there's lots of people or lots of noise going on, or even, things like strobe lights or fluorescent lighting, if we can reduce some of that stimuli or those stimulating factors, if we can move someone to perhaps a quiet, darkened room, that is probably going to help with some of their symptoms that they might be experiencing. Again, listening to what they're sharing, encouraging the person to seek help with a professional is something that we will always try to do. In terms of, if I go back to my example that I'm swearing black and blue that the sky is purple, you don't have to agree with me to try and make things okay. But I need for you not to dismiss me as well. You know, I understand that for you the sky right now is purple. That's not what I'm seeing. Naishan, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah. I was just going to add to the wonderful symptoms you're talking about. I wanted to just also flag that sometimes when someone is going through psychosis before they have an episodic or psychotic episode, which may mean being hospitalized, it's also really important for us to notice these small things. And sometimes culturally, our culture is really, it's muchly based in respect, status, and keeping things under the wrap. So that also play out in a person that may be having psychosis. Instead of disclosing that they're struggling, they'll try their best to put it under the wrap. So the person may be going through perception changes slowly. But what I often see is that when people are going through having psychosis or going through that path, sometimes it's a rejection of things that they usually like. That is the biggest giveaway. So they may start, so if they were religious, they may start questioning the religion, questioning everything. So there will be obsession over that, or the other way around. And sometimes there may be rejection of culture, so really resentfulness of what the culture is about. So you'll see that the person speaking like a lot of obsession over that rejection, like that could become the topic of, this culture is this, I hate this about this, I hate this about that. So sometimes our symptoms are a little bit different to a mainstream, because most of the time it's the rejection of things that we usually value. So our culture, our religion, our way of living, and then that person then will kind of get isolated because you're rejecting the things that the whole community hold. Then you start being isolated. So people start to say, oh, this person just talks like this, or they're a bit crazy, don't talk to them. Slowly, instead of people taking it as this person's coming down with something, they often seem like they've been brainwashed. They think they this, they think they're white, they no longer part of us. So it can be seen as, the rejection could be taken personal rather than it's an illness that's happening. And so then by that time, the person's battling alone, they can't tell anyone, and then they obviously go through psychotic episode ending up in the hospital. But usually there is lead up to it, which is characterized by aggression, so a sense of aggression at home to the family, or to siblings, or to mother or father, and then refusing to attend community functioning, refusing to go to church or whatever. And then then it's like obsession over one thing. So so I just want to flag that most of the time this is a sort of because of the respect and the stigma that goes with it, the person can't really display those other things. Like they can't go around telling people the sky is blue, and by the time they're telling people the sky is purple, is usually when they're in a psychotic episode, because the culture tells them that you definitely cannot talk to us about these things. Do not tell us about sky being purple, because that is some crazy stuff. We don't want to hear about it because we don't understand the mental illness and these sort of stuff. So I guess, I don't know if this group, if anyone here could is this my experience alone, or is this what we experience as a community, or does anyone want to say anything on that, on
No,
how our symptoms are a little bit different?
Yeah, I think you spot on, hit the nail there. It's basically that even like if even if it's like from simple things like emotional, like depression or whatever it is, sometimes it gets met by, oh, we've been through a lot, we've done this and we've done this, you know what I mean? You should be able to do it. It's not even approached, you know what I mean? In a way like, okay, if this is happening, how can we then, you know what I mean? Go forward best and stuff like that. So yeah, so imagine something like psychosis, you're going for help or whatever, definitely you're getting labeled.
Yeah. And that that can be difficult in any culture, and I with it specifically in African culture as well. There is probably a lot more stigma than perhaps maybe some of the Western world people's experience. There are certainly pockets where there is stigma attached, but maybe not as much as what has been happening, or has your experience has been in the African community. Similar to what Nyashan shared, we do know from some research that people, if they are experiencing those psychotic symptoms, or in the lead up to that anger side, that can probably, that's probably experienced by a lot of people, because particularly if it's a drug-induced psychosis, the person who has taken the drugs can't necessarily recognize emotions of other people, particularly around maybe anger or sadness or concern. And then that means that it can be misinterpreted as a threat. And that may be why the person who is in psychosis is acting aggressively in those situations, even though the person who was actually trying to help support them can be taken off guard, because that person just hasn't been able to register through facial expressions or the connection that they're actually concerned about them.
Yeah, Lauren, can I add something?
Absolutely, please do.
Yeah, thank you. What my two sisters said, based on our culture, as I said before, it's not because we really mean to be like that, but it's lack of experience that force people to be depressed and anxious and suspicious, especially our kids, because we don't know all these symptoms, how it can happen, how it can start. You can even see a lot of kids, we cannot even handle themselves. Like myself, I have children, I can't manage themselves because I don't know when the change of appetite of their appetite is changing.
Yeah.
And I don't question myself why the appetite is changing, because I'm busy somewhere else, maybe working full time. Come and the child will reduce the being together with parents or kids when he's doing something that child would know that parent will suspect him, either he's sick or not. And also even the energy when it is reducing from motivation, such as going to school or sport activities, they will be reducing slowly. But most of us, we don't know, and we can't ask them, because the kids always in up front of us, like they are in front of the parents. They know a lot of things on the social medias, even the language. They know how they can tricking their parents. But we parents can take it like, what happened to this child?
Yeah.
Not to think wider enough, but we will be thinking that this child is naughty. He's naughty, and he doesn't want to go to school. She doesn't want to go to school. She doesn't want to go to sport.
Yeah.
We're far away from what sort of things that can psychologically can affect them. We don't investigate them. And the last option to see professional person will be when the person become crazy, the way the parent just approaching that child, or when the substance increase in the body and the parent doesn't know. The parent will call relative thinking that his child or her child had something happening, rather than go and seeking for a doctor first. They will be thinking something wrong mentally with no cause, you know. So we have experienced we are experiencing these things. I would say, yes, in our culture we don't know all this because a lot of us coming from where the war, we were all displaced, and we were in trauma all the time. And even the parent, we need, like myself, we need to be support, like psychologies and mental health things, because we are living with trauma as well.
Absolutely.
Leave alone our kids. Yeah. So that's what I know. Not because we don't want this. That is because we don't know what caused the being a psycho person, or what why the child is changed behavior. What is this? So we're taking it in traditional way, which is not the way why things are happening.
Yeah. And like I touched on earlier, it can be really difficult because someone might be withdrawing, like your child or your teenager might be withdrawing because maybe, maybe something else is going on. Maybe they're being bullied at school and that's why they don't want to go to school. So it's a really difficult space, particularly when it's around, I guess, when we're thinking about teenagers in particular, because there are so.
Thank you. Like bullying at the school, as a parent, what can we do? What shall we do if your child is bullying and you go back to school and you don't get the real answer from the school, because they may taking our kids into something different behavior that we wouldn't know? What would you do as a parent if your child complaining that I'm getting bullying and the teachers are denying? What are you gonna do?
I mean, look, that's a really difficult situation. I don't work in a school, so I do know there's lots of or every school has a well-being team, or at least a well-being person. So again, that would probably or sharing concerns, as saying, this is what my child is telling me and this needs to be looked into. I don't have a lot of information because I don't work in a school, but I do believe there's pretty kind of not strict processes, but most schools take bullying pretty seriously these days. So I would like to think that schools are investigating if you as a parent are expressing that your child or children have come home and shared that they're being bullied. I believe that should be investigated. And if you speak to one teacher and they say, oh, they're not telling the truth or whatever it might be, I would then perhaps take it to the year level coordinator, or asked to speak to the wellbeing team or someone from the wellbeing team to try and explore that further.
Can I help here a little bit?
Sure.
Yep. In terms of a young person being bullied at school, as you said, every school has a wellbeing team that they support that. That's the first step to do. And also, if the welfare team member unable to, rescue the situation, the next step that you do also is to seek for any youth services support. If you go there and report that the young person has experienced some bullying at school, they will take it up.
Yeah.
And they will work with the school wellbeing team, and they will make sure that the bully stops. or the person who is actually causing harm to your young person will be dealt with. And another tip that also I want everyone to give to their young people is they should have a diary. Anytime they go to school and something happens, they should write it down.
Yeah.
And have this information down also, we use it as evidence to support your case. That's very important.
Fantastic. Great suggestions. Thank you so much.
And someone in the group also made a good comment about young people sometimes not being aware that, Sarah, do you want to elaborate on that?
My kids are making a lot of noise. Sorry, I can't.
That's okay. So Sarah is just saying that, sometimes the kids are not even aware that they are being bullied, or because of the fear of being labeled as cowards. So they could get bullied, but they don't realize that it is, the wrong thing to do. So they may even just resent school, but not really tell the parents to that they are being bullied. So I guess it's about open communication and asking as many questions to your child on why don't you like school? Is it the teacher? Is it the class? Are you tired? Just until you get an answer, and taking it up for sure, and always being on the side of your child. Especially culturally, what I would say, Lauren, is that African or East African, I can speak for that. We respect schools very much. In our country, schools are like the gold standard. They do everything they can to not only teach, but discipline and make the school ground a safe space for everybody. If someone was bullying someone, they often would get in trouble, or they will get put in check. Like, these sort of behaviors don't get ignored. So when we come to this country, there's this belief that the school is the place to learn and it's a place to grow. So a lot of respect is onto the teachers. So when a young person does come home and complain of bullying, unlike the Western or Caucasian families that would actually stand up, and African parents often would take the side of the teacher automatically, because we don't believe teachers could be the cause of problems in school, because we see them as like they're the teachers, they're your gods, they're going to teach you everything. Why would they make a learning difficult for you when their job is to make it as accessible? So the first thing would be, what did you do? What did you do? And that kind of put a young person, if that often happen, then you go to a shutdown mode. You don't come back and complain again to your parents, because they often believe the teacher that they haven't even met. But we know that discrimination does exist, and we know that racism does exist, and we know Australia is very good at having covert racism, as much as we don't want to admit that there is. So things like, you're not, you shouldn't do that class because your English is your second language, or are you sure? Do you really want to do extra curriculum? That sort of small, subtle stuff can chip away the confidence of a young person, but it's difficult if a family doesn't believe them. So for the parent that asks, what can you do? Always and always believe your child. Believe your child, go to school, take it up as much as you can, because your child only has you to defend them. That's all I can say.
Yes, no, thank you. And again, some great points raised, and thank you for sharing that information, because it certainly, helps me learn as well. And I can, pass that on when I'm working with other people or having conversations with other people about having a greater understanding of, the African culture and experiences. So thank you. I'm going to bring us back to crisis plans, and this is on the back of, I guess, paranoia, psychosis, but we can certainly, use crisis plans in any kind of situation. And I guess we can kind of have a couple. So we can have a think about, and it can be helpful for us. And I can certainly appreciate that there's probably been a number of you who have experienced terrible traumas that I can't even imagine what that was like with pause and things, and some of the reasons as to why you've relocated to Australia. But it can be helpful when there's any kind of, whether it's, you know, because of substance use, or whether it's because of a mental health issue or a co-occurrence of the two things. If we have, it doesn't even need to be called crisis plans, but if we have a think about and chat about, you know, our own personal plan when things aren't going great, what can I do that distract me, that I know make me feel better? If I call someone, if I, you know, do an activity, and if we have this kind of stuff already, you know, that we're aware of it, that we've spoken to other people, you know, maybe we've physically written it out and we've given it to people who we trust in our life, then that can be helpful. When we are setting up kind of any of these crisis plans, it's really important that we try and do this when we're all feeling like we're in a well state. So when we're in a good state of mind and, you know, there's kind of no stress, or because it allows for us to be able to think about, I know in certain situations, this is helpful for me. If we're trying to write a crisis plan when we're in a crisis, it's probably going to be a little bit all over the place, and we're not going to be able to necessarily, excuse me, apologize, de-escalate myself if I'm in that, you know, kind of high adrenaline, fight or flight potentially, or freeze kind of modes that can happen when we've, you know, when we're in a stressful kind of situation. And things to think about, you know, do we have medications? Do we have access to medications? Finances, is there childcare? Do we have pets that we need to look out for? You know, if we need to take off for a few days and leave the family home for whatever reason, are there things that we need to kind of think about and put in place? There's a number of type of tools on the internet, or kind of pictures like this, or fillable documents that we can print off from the internet if we put up, you know, crisis plans or my safety plan. There's also some apps that are available. So this one is Beyond Now, and it's been made by Beyond Blue, and it is, and this video is talking about suicide. So this person has experienced some suicidal ideation, and so this app Beyond Now is talking about putting together a safety plan for if, you know, you are experiencing suicidal ideation, or plan to suicide, and look, I'm sure there's a number of them out there. I have had a look at this app and used it before with people that I've worked with as well, even though it might not be specifically for suicide, and some of the language in the app does say suicide, but we can apply it, you know, we can just think of it as a safety plan in general, and it kind of, you know, it's pretty easy to use. You know, if I'm feeling unsafe, who do I call? What are some things that I can do? And one of the reasons that I like to share this as well, as much as it may not necessarily be 100% accurate in terms of not everyone has or experiences suicidal ideation, it is on the phone, and we know so many people have some kind of device these days, which means it's always with them. So So I'll play this video again. You know, I know this person is talking about their experience with thoughts about suicide and then talking about the safety plan. We can apply it how we kind of see fit. So I'll pop this on.
I first heard about safety planning with my psychologist, and it followed a suicide attempt where the psychologist suggested to me it might be a useful thing to have an alternate plan. So instead of going into the great depth of the planning of how to suicide, that it'd be a good idea if you had an alternate plan, one to stay alive. An important part of my safety plan was identifying people who I would call my inner circle, the most trusted people, that I could share with them what was happening, and that they not only share with them, but they would have a very clearly identified role. My safety plan includes a number of different steps. The initial step, of course, is as soon as I start to have any form of ideation, feeling that it'd be better not to be here, is to talk with my wife about it. She's my #1 support person. And the second thing to do there is to immediately contact my psychologist and make an appointment. To bridge between there and when I see the psychologist, I then use distraction. I do activities that I particularly enjoy doing, and having conversations is really important to me. I'm always at my worst when I stop engaging with the people around me. I'm a writer, so expressing how I'm feeling is always very important, because removing it from inside where I'm thinking to outside where it's on paper can often make it very plain to me what the problems are and what I need to avoid. One of the key issues in developing a plan is that you must own it. It's got to be your personalised plan. It's no good someone imposing that plan and saying, here's some steps you have to do. Anything imposed is unlikely to take hold. I think the app it's marvellous. One of the things that impresses me the most is that it's going to be there as a tool. I think that's going to be very, very important. But also just the ease of use and the fact that it is simple to navigate, the relevant amount of information, and also, I guess, the fact that it's your plan and that you can add and edit and change it to suit your needs. The parts of the app that I think would be particularly helpful to me are the circle of friends and reminding me that it's important to connect and stay connected with those friends. And also the early warning signs. You can look at them early and not let them escalate. I think a really important thing, particularly in the light of recent research, which is showing that Australian men don't intervene in the ideation cycle until very, very late, if at all. A safety plan is a great way of men being able to use the things that they normally would do, which is to plan and organise an event, and to use it early, to not let things escalate to the point where the only choice appears to be a suicide plan.
So again, that may or may not be helpful. I think Peter, I think is his name, you know, shares some good tips around getting onto things early or being aware of what some of those warning signs are. So that can be something that potentially we could take on board or have conversations with those people in our life that we know might experience, again, whether it's issues related to substance use, mental health, or a combination of the two. As we're kind of coming into the end of the session, and it's amazing that you're all here, and it's possible that, you know, you're helping to support people who might be experiencing their own substance use issues, mental health issues, again, a combination of both. We also want to encourage and make sure that you're looking after your own mental health, because we can't help anyone else if we're no good either. And it's just sometimes that reminder, particularly when we're perhaps a parent or a partner, and we put ourselves last in terms of looking after ourselves because we make sure that everyone else is okay. We also know that if we are, you know, there for someone else, and we might take on some of their trauma, we might have experienced some of our own traumas as well, which, you know, we certainly know has been the case for a number of you here tonight. And, you know, we need to make sure that we are looking after ourselves. We can also engage in professional support if we want to. That could include going to our GP and getting a mental health treatment plan, which allows us to get some sessions with a psychologist or a counsellor, sometimes at no cost, sometimes there's a small gap fee. If we've got a Medicare card, it does vary a little bit from professional to professional, but there is that option that can certainly try and minimise any cost. It could also be being aware of the things that we can do that help us, whether it's writing down, you know, maybe we like writing as well, so doing some of those journaling type of techniques, being involved within our local community, cooking, going to church, you know, breathing exercises, exercising, eating well, sleeping well. Again, some of those going back to basics can be really helpful. Like physical first aid, there is mental health first aid, which provides a bit of a framework on how to, I guess, assist someone who might be experiencing some mental health problems, and it gives us, yeah, a basis of a framework around how we can help support someone. So you can look out for those in your local area. They come up from time to time. On occasion, generally it is a paid course to go to. It's a 12-hour course. There is, as with everything these days, there is a hybrid option in terms of some e-learning and online sessions or face-to-face session, or there is purely the face-to-face sessions, which it goes over 2 days. So, but whichever way you do it, it will come to about 12 hours for you to get your mental health first aid certificate if you wish to. And there are often times where perhaps maybe an instructor gets a grant to be able to provide it to a local community where there's no cost to you. So if it's something that interests you, I encourage you to have a look out for those coming up in the area. I do know that they've recently updated their website and IT system, and they're having a few issues with it. So do keep in mind that maybe it might not be fully functional at the moment, but excuse me, I'm sure by the beginning of next year, there might be opportunities that you could have a look at if you were interested in that. We've covered a fair bit tonight. Mental health in general, which came first, some statistics around co-occurring conditions. Oh, excuse me. Treatment, paranoia, psychosis, self-care. Jeff, I'll hand it over to you if there's anything you want to share while I just quietly die in the background.
Yeah, so, hi, yeah, take a break. You've done really well. Thank you, Lauren. Great presentation. I think going back, there's great things covered, and there's great questions from people too, and clarification. There's some cultural points brought up as well, which were really helpful. One was when someone's not well and the whole community gathers around them and asks a lot of questions and stuff like that. You know, when someone's in a state, and we were talking at that stage about psychosis, and when someone's in a state, it's I think Lauren did say in the slide, it can be overwhelming for them, taking on more information and lots of people talking at the same time. So that can exasperate the situation. And the other one I'd like to point out is when talking to someone that's in psychosis and so forth, is be reassuring. And as Lauren pointed out, it might not be your reality, but it's certainly theirs at that moment. And talk in very small sentences. Big sentences, no good. They lose what you're talking about. They don't know what you're talking about. If you ask a lot of questions, it's they can't come forward with it, and it becomes very overwhelming for them. So very short sentences is one thing you can keep in mind when you talk to people. Very short sentences. I don't think I have anything more to add that. I think the mental health, what Lauren was just talking about, that mental health course is a very good course. I've done them, and I've done the youth one as well. There's a youth mental health first aider course. That's a very good one if you're worried about children and looking after young people and so forth. It's a fantastic course to do to gain more insight and all those things that Lauren had already said. Other than that, I think that was just we covered a lot, and the questions are good, and you could go on, couldn't you? A lot of things. But I'll hand it back to you, Lauren. And
thanks, Jeff. I'll just share a couple more slides, and it's just to show or to build your awareness around some services that are available that you may not be aware of, and feel free. Well, obviously it's being recorded, but if you want to take a photo of these slides so that you've got the contact details, please feel free if you want to come back to them. So there's a number of different services there. Headspace is more directed for youth, and lots of good information there. And also on this next page around some potential supports that are available. A lot, maybe a 24/7 kind of phone line. So if you're having a bit of a hard time, or someone if they've got a couple of these numbers saved in their phone, it could be, that they get the opportunity or aware that there are these services out there, and there's not going to be any judgment or stigma attached to them calling, as one of the things that obviously has been brought up this evening is around the, within the culture that it may not be spoken about, or particularly, young people in our lives may not openly share that they've used any substances for fear of that stigma or judgment that might be made, whether from their own community or just community in general. So that open communication and talking about these things in an open way can be what we've found is really beneficial, and I think that goes across cross-culturally. That doesn't just work for Western or Caucasian people. If we can have these conversations and say, hey, I went to, a session on mental health and there was things I didn't know, were you aware of this, or what do you know about mental health? That can sometimes open those conversations up, and you can gain an understanding of perhaps what the young people in your life already know. And again, if we can have these open, they know that it's a safe space to be able to say, I'm feeling this or I'm experiencing this, and there is going to be some support there, then I think that can only be a helpful thing. Another thing I know works really well with young people is when you go for a drive with them, because then you're not looking them directly in the eye. They don't need to make that eye contact because you're concentrating on driving, but it can, and I don't know, that might not cross over in the cultural aspect, but I certainly know that is, I guess, a little tip for any young people that I've worked with or I've had colleagues work with, again, from all cultures, is jumping in the car with them and going for a bit of a drive, because it doesn't feel so full on for them, because we don't need to be making eye contact when we're talking about some of this, what might feel more uncomfortable kind of conversations. So that brings us to the end of the session. Nigel, I don't know if you want to wrap up or say anything else, or I'll open up the floor if there's any other comments or questions from anyone about anything that we've covered or that anyone wants to share.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lauren. I think, yeah, we'll open the space for any question. But before that, I just wanted to mention that the EAP as well, because sometimes there's a stigma attached to people needing to go to the GP, especially if they don't feel they're in crisis. Our community, everything is done on the extreme side of it. You wait till things are extreme. There's no middle ground. So for people who you may be just, struggling, maybe having sleep issues or, mini symptoms, you can even go through your workplace. If you're working, most workplaces you get at least 3 anonymous sessions with a psychologist paid through EAP. So it's just a matter of asking sometimes it's in the you will find it in the staff room, because it's made that it's supposed to be where no one should know that you're doing it, and you can just make a phone call and say, I'm calling from X, Y, and Z, and I want to, yeah. So everybody's entitled to that. Most organizations have that. So yeah, do you take advantage? I know I've used up all my 3 so far.
And it's something I've done as well, particularly during COVID. Tough time for a lot of people as well. So I know I've utilized those EAP sessions, and I don't know if it's similar. I would say it's kind of 3 sessions for every, for separate. Yeah. So we might have used EAP once before, like I used it when in COVID, but now I might have another issue that I'm dealing with now. I could re-engage with them and get another 3 sessions because it's a different issue.
That's right. And I guess the other thing I wanted to say is that, in the back of paranoia and psychosis and everything we talked about today is that, we're definitely not trying to say go around diagnose anyone, but and also that people can go through paranoia and psychosis and be okay after that. That's one thing that we also struggle with as a community, that when someone does go through mental health challenge, they kind of stuck with it for life, like where it's kind of used against them. Their sense of respect is taken. There's like, it's like, well, they went through this, or they went a bit crazy or whatever. So I think as a group, we also just want to say that people can get better and go back to their normal life. It's not something like a label that they have to forever have. And it also, on the other flip side, it can come back again, if the person doesn't get the support that they need. So just being mindful of that. And definitely do look after each other. And at our center, everybody who knows us, that we do support with counseling and other support as well. And also our website and our social media has all the crisis numbers and support numbers that Lauren has shared. So if you didn't get it, you can always go on our page and you'll find them under the resources as well. And we'll be back again next week on Wednesday with a different topic. So thank you. I guess I can stop the recording. Whoever is doing the recording can stop now.
Okay, thanks a lot.